So to start with, I'm using the skirt block and I'm going to lower the waist a little bit by 5 centimeters on the front and the back before we create the shaping of our waistband. So I'm using my grading ruler. I know that my grading ruler is 5 centimeters wide, so I'm taking this measurement and following the shape of the top edge. Don't be afraid to put markings and lines on your blocks. They are designed to be used, so that involves drawing on them and tracing through them. Try not to cut them, but they're designed to be used, so don't worry about leaving marks. When your block gets too shabby, then you just cut another one. So I'm gently curving around following this edge. So this will be the new top edge of the skirt. Okay, now I'm going to take some paper and start tracing these lines. Starting with the front, I've got my paper folded and I have enough space around here to create the curving waistband. So placing the center front fold on the center front of my paper and putting them in line and placing a weight on so that it doesn't move around. I'm going to use the tracing wheel to follow this line here. And I'm also going to trace this line of the dart like that. Okay, now we mark it in pen so that we can see. And I'm also going to draw that line where the dart sits along there. So this here is the center front, and this is the center front waist of the curved waistband. Now in the waistband, we want to eliminate the value of this dart. So what we'll be doing is tracing this line around here without the dart. So now I'm going to place this dart arm in line with this line that I've drawn here, and I'm making sure that the line here matches this line that I've got down here. So it's on the right angle. Now I can trace off that second section and get that little curve of the side seam. Okay, now we decide the width of our waistband. So I'm going to make this one 3 centimeters, and I'm using the 3 centimeter mark on my ruler, to get the shaping. And now I add the seam allowance all the way around. So we're going to use a 12mm seam allowance around the waist, 12mm on the side, and this top edge will be 6 millimeters. So you'll notice that as I'm adding details or seam allowance or notches, I'm constantly moving the pattern pieces around. So you want to move it around to make it easy for you when you're adding details like seam allowance on. So now I'm doing the 6 mils across the top edge. and to cut it out I'll need to put some pins in here so that it doesn't move around. Before I unpin it, make sure that you've transferred all the information to the other side. And I'm ruling in the stitching line into the corners and to this section where we have that extra notch. Okay, for the grain line, for the skirt front we use this vertical grain line here, and for the skirt, to make it a little bit stronger, we're going to use the cross grain. The only reason you wouldn't use the cross grain is if you were using a print that was one direction, or if you wanted to change a vertical stripe to a horizontal, for example. So we're just going to, I'm using the center of the ruler to line up with the fold, and then I will draw a grain line across like that. Okay, before I finish with the notching and the labeling, I'll do the back skirt waistband, and then I'll double check the flow through before I finish them both off. Now for the back, we're going to create 2 back pattern pieces. The reason being, one of the center backs will need an extension for the button. So one of the back pieces of the waistband will finish at this width, and the other one will have a 3 centimeter extension. So I'm using 2 little bits of paper here. Now placing a weight on, I'm going to start from the center back and then work around to the side seam. So tracing this, trace around the waistline and the dart arm. Now don't forget to label this. The thing with the centre back waistband panels is that they look quite similar. And it's can be a little bit hard to tell which is the centre back and which is the side seam. So label it as soon as you can. There's the centre back. Okay, and we're going to repeat the same process that we did on the front by placing the second arm of the dart on top of the first arm, so that okay, and I'm making sure that that stitching line on the bottom is in line with this stitching line, and the arm of the dart is extending up through that notch. So that's sitting perfectly now, and I can trace side seam, and this part, the lower part down here. Okie dokie, I have a nice smooth curve on that bottom line. I've got the centre back marked and the side seam. And now to do the 3 centimeter top edge of the waistband. Before I add my seam allowances, I'm going to double check the flow through with the front. So lining up the stitching lines, I can see that that point is matching there on the top and it's matching on the bottom. So I'm pretty happy with that width there. Before we add the centre back seam allowance, we're going to remember to add our button extension, which is 3 centimeters. And that's parallel with the centre back. So extending that out at a right angle. like that. Now we're drawing 12 mils, 12 mils across the bottom, mils on the centre back, and because we're following the same pattern from this one, we do 6 mils on the top edge. Before we cut it out, transfer the information across to both sides. Place a couple of pins in it, and then we're ready to cut it out. All right, on the back of the waistband, for a woman's garment, the opening will be on the right, which means our back left side, which is this one, will keep the extension, and on the right side, we will cut off the extension. I'm often getting confused with my left and rights, and when you're talking about pattern pieces, you need to think it's left and right as it would be on your own body, not as you're looking at it. So for example, if I hold these waistbands up, this is the left and then this is the right. So that's the way that I remember. So now here I've transferred using the tracing wheel to transfer the information to the back, and now I'm going to add some of those markings on so that I don't forget them. Okay, now the grain line for the back again will be following the front, so horizontal this way, and we'll use the centre back as a right angle and extend the grain line perpendicular from that. Centre back. Side seam. Okay, now to finish our notching and labelling. So starting with this one. So each seam has one notch. Whoops. That one got a little bit stuck. Each seam has one notch, and then we include a little notch down here on the bottom of the waistband for where it connects to the dart, and then the last notch over here. Do the same for the left back. That notch is to indicate the centre back. The dart. Centre back. And here on this corner I can either go for this seam or this seam. Yeah. Okay, And the notching on the back, front waistband. On the front we have a centre front on the top and the bottom, as well as the position of these darts. The dart position on the waistband does not need to appear on the top edge of the waistband. It's only down here where it's actually connected to the position of the dart. Now we do our seam allowances, the centre front or the centre back, depending on whether you have the all-in-one on the back or the front. It's very important to have a notch. It's very helpful for the machinist when they're constructing the garment to include the centre front or the centre back notch. Okay, so starting over here. Moving around in a clockwise direction. Okay. Finishing the labelling and then we're done. So the name. This is a curved waistband. WB can be used as an abbreviation for waistband. This is the front. And the cutting instructions for this one will be cut one pair self. So this top edge of the waistband is bagged out with itself, and this is why we use a 6mm seam allowance along here. That's just to reduce the bulk in this section of the garment. And because it's a waistband, we want the strength that is provided by fusing. So we say plus block fusing. Size 10, and this is 1 of 3. And there we have it.